everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark,
And I'm Midge Munster.
and today I thought that I would delve back into the spooky fashion history. And I think we've now said delving on every single episode. I need to get my brain on a different track.
I was listening back recently and I was like, damn, we do love to delve.
We just delve deeper and deeper and we see what happens. But I had so much fun talking about poison rings, and we got a lot of thumbs up about that, and people who are also interested in kind of dark fashion history. So today I am going to be talking to you about arsenic green.
I don't even know what this is, so I'm very excited to learn.
I am so excited to tell you.
Yeah.
So I did read a couple different articles and watch some videos actually for this one. So just wanted to give credit at the top. I got a lot of information from an article in the Paris Review called Scheele's Green, the color of fake foliage and death.
Ooh.
Yep. And also from Nicole Rudolph's video, The Truth About Arsenic in the 19th Century.
Incredible. I'm so excited.
All right, let's sit back and dive in. We are going back to 1775, which is when Carl Wilhelm Scheele invented what would come to be known as Scheele's Green. This was an artificial colorant made through a process of heating sodium carbonate, adding arsenic oxide, stirring it, and then adding copper sulfate to the final solution, which gave this beautifully stunning bright green color.
Nice.
So this was super striking and super profitable because it was really cheap to produce, and it also really looked like a natural green. Like, I think something that we don't necessarily think about a lot today is that like brightly colored dyes just weren't that common for a lot of history. Like, you know, you were using natural pigments, kind of doing what you could. A lot of greens, I guess, tended to go on like the teal side or like kind of yellowy. But Scheele's Green was like a beautiful, like bright ivy green, and it was cheaper than other green pigments, and it had it was really powerful. Like, it made things a bright color with like a relatively low amount of it. So people were like, hell yeah, we love this. But you may have heard that arsenic oxide was one of those ingredients, and that is, in fact, arsenic.
Perfect. What could go wrong?
Perfect. Yes. So part of things that I found really interesting, like looking back on this, was that this like wild fad for green actually is something that I think we can relate to a lot today. Like, Victorians were very concerned that like the Industrial Revolution had like ruined society, that like everything was gray and ugly, like guys worked, you know, white collar jobs instead of toiling in the fields. And they really had this like, you know, obsession with this idea of like the pastoral life and flowers and beautiful greens. And I mean, you know, all of us are all about that cottagecore today.
Well, and it seems like I know someone who likes green so much that they dyed their hair that color.
Oh, sounds like a weird person. I don't know who would be that into green.
They would later come to call Scheele's Green Penny's hair green. Is the official Pantone color now.
Love it. Yes. So there was just this mad interest in green everything, green wallpaper, green clothing, and fake flowers and like floral headdresses were super, super popular at this time.
Come on, Victorian Coachella.
Right? Part of this was because a, you know, hashtag influencer of the Victorian era, who was Empress Eugenie, married to Napoleon III, and she had a huge impact on fashion. She wore this green gown to the opera, and people just like lost their minds about it.
Oh man, okay.
And
She
everyone,
trendsetted.
yeah, she set the trend. Like, she was the one who was like, big crinolines are in. She would wear a different dress in the morning and the evening, and a different dress for nighttime. Apparently, she never wore the same gown twice.
Fast fashion. It's all her fault.
Right, except for the most expensive fast fashion in the world.
Right.
And she is also credited with the one in the 1860s when she was like, actually, I'm not into crinolines anymore, and like started wearing slimmer silhouette skirts. And then everyone else was like, we hate crinolines too. Get rid of this.
We saw her wearing a shirt with the boobs cut out, and now I'm wearing a shirt. She's the
Exactly.
Regina George of.
She is. She's the Regina George of Victorian times.
I love that.
But yeah, so this dye was being used, and this was there's also another color called Paris green that was more emerald that came later. And part of the big issue is that arsenic is like fine if it's solid, but if you are inhaling it is when you are
Mm.
getting issues here. And exposure to arsenic can cause skin lesions, vomiting, diarrhea, and cancer in some cases. And so for most people, like, you would probably get like a rash or irritation. So for example, like wearing green gloves that hadn't been properly sealed, like a woman would get like blisters on your hands, or
Ooh.
something like your collar or a slipper lining that like rubbed up against your skin a lot. But you would kind of think like, oh well, then, like, these are bad gloves, I won't wear these. This was something that was really interesting in Nicole's video, was talking about how there was a lot of marketing at this time because the Victorians knew arsenic was dangerous.
Right.
Like, they knew that it was bad for you, but like a lot of places would be like, oh well, if it's high quality, then it's going to be color fast and you're not going to get the arsenic on you, so it's fine.
Sounds like something a poisoner would say.
Right. So there was a newspaper report from the time where world-renowned analytical chemist Dr. A.W. Hoffman was asked to test deadly green fashions. And so a lot of ladies were wearing, like these elaborate, like floral headdresses with like artificial leaves. And Hoffman concluded that the average headdress contained enough arsenic to kill 20 people.
Oh my God.
And obviously, when you're wearing this on your head, it's just going to dust directly into your face
Yeah, like
for
your
you to.
eyes and your mouth and
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Yep. And apparently, like, one of these, like, in vogue ball dresses, also very heavy on the arsenic. A doctor in Berlin said a green ball gown would shed approximately 60 grains of powder in the course of the evening, with 4 or 5 grains being lethal for the average adult.
Oh
And
no.
right. And of course, as is the case with everything, the people who suffered the most are, like the factory workers who
Yeah.
were making these, applying dyes and fabrics. Because, if you're like, oh no, my green gloves gave me a rash, I won't wear these anymore, like, that's fine for you. But not so much an option for people who are working with it all day, every day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most infamous victims of arsenic green was Matilda Schur, a 19-year-old factory girl who worked fluffing artificial leaves and dusting them with green pigment. She became very ill due to repeated arsenic exposure, and apparently, leading up to her death, she was said to have, quote, vomited green waters and the whites of her eyes turned green
Oh
as
God.
she was dying. I don't know how much of that is, like, kind of old-timey press, like hyperbole,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it was not pleasant. It was a very unfortunate way to be killed.
I wonder if that's what do you know that song, the artificial flowers, and it talks about the little girl Annie, and she's making artificial flowers, and then she dies.
Oh, yeah, probably inspired by this.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've never thought about it. I thought she was just, poor and cold. But now I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it, and I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah, I've been like,
uh-oh.
oh no. Even Queen Victoria was impacted by arsenic green. She had a diplomat complained of being ill after staying overnight in a room that had green wallpaper, and she had it all stripped and redone in the palace. And then I'm sure a lot of people will have heard that there are theories that Napoleon may have been killed because of arsenic laced wallpaper, although science today think that it's probably like would have made him ill, but like wasn't enough to like kill him. But yeah, there was just
So some of these things, like the fashions they were testing that had, they okay, it would shed this much or whatever, and that's twice or three times the amount of what would like be lethal to someone. How were people not just like dropping dead left and right because it was like going on the floor and stuff and not
yeah, it's like just like the concentration of it. Like I think it's like if you like took that amount of arsenic, if you like
okay,
ingested it, you would die.
but it
But
was wafting in the
it was
breeze, so
kind
it
of
was fine.
wafting around, and this was something that was kind of came up more in Nicole's video, which I really appreciated because she was like, well, let's talk about why people would still use these things when they knew that it was bad.
As if humans don't just do that all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Which we 100% do. But one of the things is arsenic poisoning is not like generally immediate. Like if you're not, like ingesting a large quantity, like we just said.
Hmm.
So like it can take a while, and like a lot of the side effects are things that are similar from like exposure to molds or like smogs. Obviously, it was generally a bad time to be breathing in Europe. Like there's a lot of smog, there's a lot of all sorts of junk going around. We also didn't have the ability to test for arsenic until 1836, and this
Oh.
color came up in 1775. So
So then how were they testing the fashions?
they weren't, I think they like were that this was like coming in later in like the 1850s and
Oh,
60s when
gotcha.
it became
Okay.
more popular. But
So
like
for like 20 years, everyone was just walking around
yeah, well,
like
so
la la la
they
la la.
used arsenic was like people would use arsenic as food coloring, like the
Oh
greens
no.
added to drinks. There was an infamous Bradford sweets poisoning. 21 people died from eating hard candies that someone made, and they put in. It wasn't 100% clear to me whether this was purposeful or not, but they used white arsenic in place of like what they normally would have been using to like thicken this candy.
They're like, well, out of cornstarch. Guess I'll add this
Right?
arsenic.
Yeah. And also that we all think about, people talk about arsenic green. Green is very much the center of it. There was arsenic in like everything else too. There
Yeah.
were blue and yellow dyes that were made in a similar way that included arsenic. Arsenic was also used just as a um, something to make dye stick for other colors. So anything in a color you have could have had arsenic be used in the process of dyeing like the thing. It was also used as a preservative in like glues. So like your wallpaper paste could have
Yeah.
arsenic and be poisonous, even if it wasn't green. And even when arsenic was regulated or banned, literally no one was testing it because it
Hmm.
was the olden times and there were no actual regulations about anything. There was no FDA, there were no governing
Right.
bodies. So like people would literally sell stuff labeled arsenic free that just fully had arsenic in
Wink,
it.
wink.
Yep. Because it was just like hashtag no rules and you could just do whatever.
Well, and that's, I mean, think about how long it took for them to like get rid of lead paint, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and that was in like times where things were kind of regulated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how easy it was to just be like, oh, yeah, here's some poisonous wallpaper. It'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting because some of those articles were saying, we probably associate it with green because green as a whole was just so popular and trendy. Like, there was obviously, a lot of ways to tie it back to that, when like something being green or not really didn't necessarily have a lot of bearing on whether or not it was super poisonous.
Sure.
But yeah, it's very wild to see all of this stuff. And like, even with like the poisonous candy thing, they didn't make limits about the acceptable amount of arsenic in food until 10 years after that.
Weird.
So there were no laws. It was just YOLO all day, every
I,
day.
I mean, it's not super. Again, like this was kind of during a time where people were still like dueling with pistols, and I
Hmm.
mean, like people weren't really taking a lot of stock in whether people lived or died.
Yeah,
Like they were kind of like, well, it's honestly just a matter of time. So if it's the
that
arsenic that gets you, I guess that's it.
it is. And it is just, I don't know. I always think about, what things do we have now that
Oh,
people are going to be like, wow, can't believe you were doing that. Because,
right.
there's plenty. I mean, even just like looking at the difference between like what different countries find acceptable and like
Yeah.
say this is okay to sell to people, just goes to show that like, it's not just a thing about people in the past, being just dummies and not caring. They just had no way of knowing a lot of this stuff, and they were like, well, freaking everything in my life is poison, so I might as well wear my awesome fake floral headdress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I wonder, I'm probably totally like off the path about this, but um I wonder if like cuz absinthe even, I'm wondering if
Hmm.
that like the green fairy color, like if anything of that had to do with arsenic at one point too, cuz that would be like straight, cuz I know that like too arsenic and old lace or whatever is a cocktail. Like
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much if there's just yeah, that would be the absolute the absolute worst to be like drinking alcohol and arsenic.
Yeah, yeah. It did. One of the articles I read did say that like bars would like put arsenic like colorant in drinks to
Yeah.
make it look cool.
Well, that's I know
Um,
the arsenic and old lace cocktail has absinthe in it, and absinthe is like green.
it is. It is. Yeah, and some people theorize that the reason that we still like kind of picture like toxic things are often depicted as being green
Mm-hmm.
is because of this history of green being very literally toxic.
Interesting. Isn't that weird how things like evolve?
Right, and that they just last, and that was part of what I thought was really entertaining about learning that. It's like, oh well, we also made blues and yellows like this, and we did this, and
Right.
you wouldn't think that like blue is like, oh, it's poison, but it was also very possibly poison.
Well, green just looks radioactive. So like it's like, whoa. But I guess maybe that's just our association.
Yes. It's all in there. But yeah, obviously I am personally a fan of non-toxic greens. So I understand the appeal, but
Is
try
now
not
a
to
bad time
do
to
that.
tell you how they make your hair dye or
Oh no. Hopefully it's not dusting off on me.
it is in a terrible position for that. It's the flower crown of the head.
It Hair is the flower crown of the head, Midge. That's very true. Yeah, that is my fashion history for you today.
Oh, I love
The
it. I love when you bring these bizarre things that I just have no knowledge of because I'm not my history knowledge pretty much stops at like the 1930s. So I love that you bring these unique topics. They're always so fun to learn about.
Yes, I mean, obviously we're both big fans of fashion, and anytime that
Mhm.
you can combine fashion with something a little bit dark and spooky, I am
Just a
all about
teeny bit
it.
morbid.
Yes. And I will get some like cool photos of like arsenic green dresses and things to share on the Instagram because they are beautiful and I would 100% wear those. So I understand why people were rocking the arsenic at all of their balls.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do like a deadly greens like Instagram challenge.
Yes.
Tag us in your deadly green looks.
Hell yeah. Well, that's a quick one for today. We hope you had a fun time listening along with us, though. If you enjoyed the show, we would so much appreciate if you gave us a rating and review on your podcast app. We don't have any new reviews today, so if you get one in now, you could be hearing yourself real soon on the podcast. And
Yeah.
isn't that an exciting prospect?
Yes. This is where all the cool kids want to be, having their review read right here on Ghouls Night In.
If you would like to follow along with the podcast and see some of those cool green photos that I mentioned, you can find us on Instagram at Ghouls Night In Pod. And if you ever want to get in touch, you can reach us at ghoulsnightinpod@gmail.com. You can find me and my green head at Penny Snark.
And you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
goodbye.